It took until his seventh offseason as general manager. It took two playoff trips, and it took an ownership change. But Mike Elias has finally signed a free agent to a multi-year deal. But it's not a pitcher. I'll tell you why. Tyler O'Neill is a Baltimore Oriole and what he will bring to this ball club. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Saturday, December 7th, 2024, and welcome back into a special edition of the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're talking Tyler O'Neill because the Orioles have made their first big signing of the offseason, their first big signing under David Rubenstein, and their first multi-year deal given to a free agent since Mike Elias took over all the way back in November of 2018. It's been a long time, but the O's have dished out a multi-year deal. It's to Tyler O'Neill, right-handed hitting outfielder who's going to patrol right field next year for the Orioles. I'll tell you how he fits into Baltimore. We'll talk about the contract, and we'll go through what the traits of O'Neill that could make this deal go very right, and what some of them are that could make this deal go wrong. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So we're here with you on a Saturday. Some is because the Orioles' first signing of the offseason broke on a Saturday. Some is because I didn't give you an episode on Friday. I was feeling a little under the weather Thursday and Friday. Feeling good again here on Saturday, except for you may be able to hear it. My voice is still not totally 100% back, although I'm still feeling okay now. So bear with me on that one, but wanted to get out an episode for the Orioles' first big signing of the offseason. And that big signing is Tyler O'Neill, reported on Saturday, corroborated by multiple reporters, that the Orioles have signed veteran outfielder Tyler O'Neill to a 3-year, $49.5 million deal in free agency. And as I mentioned before, it is the first multi-year contract the Orioles have agreed to with a free agent since Mike Elias took over. And it is surprising that, we all thought that would eventually be a pitcher. It's a position player. Despite all the depth the Orioles have in their lineup, it is a position player that gets a multi-year deal. Now, there is a chance it may not be a multi-year deal because, as Andy Koska of the Baltimore Banner reported, there is actually an opt-out in this deal for Tyler O'Neill after year one. So he will make $16.5 million in each of the 3 seasons, 2025, 2026, and 2027. But he has the option to opt out after 1 year. So basically how it'll work is, if Tyler O'Neill stays healthy and is awesome for the Orioles this year in his first year of the deal, he'll probably opt out so he can hit free agency again, be more valuable, and make more money on a longer contract. If he isn't fully healthy, he misses some time, he doesn't fully live up to the hitter he can be, he'll probably just opt in because he figures, I'm not going to get more money than this, and he'll stick around for the final 2 years of the deal. So it's not a guarantee that O'Neill is an Oriole for the next 3 seasons, especially if he really, really kills it this year in Baltimore. So it's kind of a weird situation where, you would love for him to be incredibly productive, but that probably means he opts out after the season. You have to pay him more money to bring him back. But let's talk first about, who is Tyler O'Neill and what will his role be with the Orioles? Well, he's a 29-year-old right-handed hitting outfielder who will be 30 next June, who has been on 2 teams in his career. He was originally drafted by the Mariners out of high school in 2013 in the 3rd round. In 2017, when he was kind of pretty close to the major leagues at that point, he was traded to the Cardinals in a deadline deal. And then in 2018, he debuted with the St. Louis Cardinals and was with St. Louis through the 2023 season when he was traded last offseason to the Boston Red Sox for his final year before free agency, and he played this year with Boston. Now, this year with Boston, he was pretty great. It was only 113 games and 473 plate appearances, but O'Neill hit .241 with a 336 on base, a 511 slugging. That was good for a 131 WRC plus this season. He had 31 homers. He drove in 61 runs. He had a career high 11.2% strikeout rate, 11.2% walk rate. Did come with also a pretty much career high 33.6% strikeout rate, one of the higher ones in Major League Baseball as well. He was worth 2.5 wins. That was his WAR, according to FanGraphs. So a pretty productive season, basically the second best of O'Neill's career, came in that 1 year in Boston. For the Orioles, he will play right field. He's been an outfielder pretty much his entire career. He's not the same outfielder now he was defensively a couple of years ago, but he can still patrol it out there. And more than likely, he will be the Orioles' everyday right fielder. Now, he really mashes lefties, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but that doesn't mean he's just a platoon player, right? He's going to play most days out there for the Orioles. And what that also really means is Anthony Santander is not coming back. I mean, the Orioles needed someone who could hit right-handed, could crush lefties, and someone to play the outfield, either Santander or a replacement. This is basically the replacement. Now, he's closer to Santander level defensively out there. And yes, he's much better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. But I don't think they're bringing him in to platoon with Heston Kjerstad. I still think they'll find ABs for Kjerstad, and O'Neill won't be out there every single day for the Orioles, especially because he does have an injury history that we'll get to. But I think this is a signing where I would still say the top two options out there were Teoscar Hernandez and Anthony Santander. But a close number three is Tyler O'Neill. And if you look at his pure production, now he played 40 less games, but a 131 WRC plus beats the 129 that Santander produced this year. And on my free agent right-handed hitter wish list, Teoscar Hernandez was number one, and Tyler O'Neill was number two on that list. And it is O'Neill who is coming to Baltimore. And again, Kjerstad might spell him out there, might fill in for him. The Orioles have the position depth to fill in for O'Neill if he does get injured, but it is his job out in right field with the Orioles. And it fills a hole for the team. The reality is just that the O's are not bringing back Santander. And again, it's not completely out of the question because he's still out there. Another team has not signed him yet. You never know. The O's could get creative, trade someone, bring in Santander as more of a DH. Yeah, that's possible. But I think this pretty much closes that book and says Anthony Santander is going to sign elsewhere this offseason. And that's sad, right? We'll dive into that more when he officially signs with another team at some point this winter. But it is kind of the downside of this deal. You get excited. Tyler O'Neill's a great player. We'll talk about what he can bring even more. But you get a little upset that this is kind of the writing on the wall that, hey, Santander, as much as he's meant to the Orioles, will not be back. Hopefully O'Neill is a good replacement, maybe even better replacement for Santander, but that does kind of close that chapter. What this also probably means is that the Orioles could have gone the way of bringing in like more of a platoon guy, like a Randall Grichuk, and then tried to add around the offense more. With paying O'Neill to be more of, at least closer to the everyday right fielder, this will probably be the last position player the Orioles add this offseason besides their backup catcher. They still need to bring in a backup catcher. I still think they're probably just going to bring James McCann back. But besides that, this might be the only major league deal position player addition that the Orioles make this offseason. So that's kind of the overview of who is Tyler O'Neill, this big buff. I mean, he is absolutely jacked outfielder who hits the ball incredibly hard and incredibly far. And, the Orioles got him for a solid price. The free agent matrix by John Becker at FanGraphs had a 3-year, $42 million deal. Orioles do 3 years, $49.5 million. It's much less than Santander or Teoscar Hernandez is going to get with potentially similar production. But the question is, okay, let's dive into the numbers. Like, yeah, we see O'Neill had a good season. You can also see he hasn't played a whole lot since he's been in the big league since 2018. Why is that the case? We'll get to that later. But first, let's start with the good stuff. What made O'Neill so good this year? And when he has been at his peak dominance at the plate in his career, what has made him such a good hitter? We'll talk about those green flags for Tyler O'Neill coming up after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, You get a Tyler O'Neill signing, you start to think about opening day, but we're still a ways away from buying baseball tickets on Game Time. But there's still plenty going on in the offseason. You want to get basketball, football, or hockey tickets. Game Time is your place. But maybe you don't want to go to sports. Maybe you want to do some other things in the offseason. That's great too. Game Time picks, the curation makes it easy to save more on sports, but also concerts, comedy, theater, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So with this Tyler O'Neill deal, let's start with the positives. Let's start with why this is going to work out for the Orioles, the green flags, if you will. And the first thing is he's coming off an awesome season, right? I mentioned his numbers, second most games played, second highest WRC plus. Only season that was better was his kind of breakout season in 2021 with the St. Louis Cardinals. But he was really, really good in this same division, hitting at these same ballparks against these same pitchers in the AL East with the Red Sox last year. And he is really that big time right-handed bat that the Orioles truly needed. Like, he is a guy at the plate who imposes fear in opposing pitchers, especially left-handed pitchers. And that's why the Orioles like him so much. I mean, without him in the lineup, and say the Orioles lose Anthony Santander, right? They don't bring anyone else in, and so you put Heston Kjerstad in right field. The O's theoretically had one switch hitter in their most everyday lineup. That's Adley Rutschman. 6 lefties, Henderson, Holiday, O'Hearn, Kjerstad, Mullins, and Cowser, and then 2 righties in Mountcastle and Westberg. And yeah, if they were facing a left-handed pitcher, you'd probably sit O'Hearn in favor of, maybe if Kobe Mayo's on the team or Ramon Arias or whomever, and maybe you'd sit Holiday early in the year against lefties too. So I get it. You get some more righties in there. But those are like your general top 9 if you don't bring in another hitter. Lefties play, even with the wall moved back in some, lefties play better at Camden Yards, but you can't have that lefty heavy of a lineup. It can really come back to hurt you, especially with those big time lefty relievers at the end of the lineup. And the Orioles went out, and some of this is because both Westberg and Arias were hurt last year, but the Orioles went out and added, Eloy Jimenez and Austin Slater and Emmanuel Rivera just to try and fix that problem of not being right-handed enough. Like, it's something that Mike Elias talked about. And this is great because instead of adding on the edges, you get a legit guy you're going to put out there most days, who's a big right-handed power threat in your lineup. And that's something the O's were missing since Ryan Mountcastle just kind of stopped pulling the ball and stopped turning into a big power threat. Like, yeah, he's a good hitter at times, and yeah, Jordan Westberg is a very good hitter, but those aren't like legitimate giant righty power threats. That's what Tyler O'Neill is, a guy who hit 31 home runs last season, who drives the baseball like he does. That is a piece that the Orioles were just missing, and especially O'Neill just mashes left-handers. The Orioles, they were, after July 1st, they were 14th best offense in baseball against lefties. They were a top 5 team earlier in the season, but they did struggle a little bit against left-handed pitching, and they were vulnerable because of the amount of lefties in the lineup. But let's talk about a leaderboard last year. Among players who had at least 150 plate appearances against lefties, basically those are guys who are mostly in there when a lefty is on the mound. Here are the best hitters by WRC Plus in the major leagues in 2024 who had at least 150 plate appearances against lefties. Number 1 is Aaron Judge. You may have heard of him. Pretty much the best hitter in baseball last year, had a 236 WRC Plus against left-handed pitching. Number 2 was Tyler O'Neill with a 215 WRC Plus. That's right. Only Aaron Judge was better than Tyler O'Neill against left-handed pitching last year. So if you're looking at available players to get, you can't get anyone who's available better than Tyler O'Neill to help you out against left-handed pitching. And again, you look at the rest of this list, it's like it's MVP candidates and Tyler O'Neill. Aaron Judge, number 1, O'Neill, number 2, Jose Ramirez, number 3, Yordan Alvarez, number 4, Ketel Marte, number 5. And O'Neill's right in there. An aside, Adley Rutschman was 10th on that list, so that's a really good combo now the Orioles have, especially if Rutschman can get back on his game. But O'Neill overall against lefties was fantastic. 313 average, 429 on base, 750 slugging with 16 homers and a 17% walk rate against left-handed pitching. Now, obviously, you face lefties less often than you face righties. And he did have just a 91 WRC plus against righties. He was a slightly below average hitter against right-handers. So he did a lot of his damage against lefties, and the Red Sox would sit him from time to time last year against righties. But over his career, he's still certainly been a solidly productive hitter against righties and an absolute masher when he is out there healthy against lefties. And some of the reason is he is just an exit velocity monster. Like, you want to look at these StatCast data darlings, guys that light that thing up, and the Orioles love that. Tyler O'Neill is that guy. His 17% barrel rate. A barrel is essentially when you hit the ball at a specific launch angle with a specific exit velocity. It's supposed to be like the best contact you can make. A lot of barrels lead to home runs and extra base hits. 17.3% barrel rate was fifth in baseball among players with at least 450 plate appearances this year. Here are the four players, the only four players in the majors who had a better barrel rate than Tyler O'Neill this season. Aaron Judge, you may have heard of him. We've already talked about him. Shohei Ohtani, might have heard about that guy. Giancarlo Stanton famously hits the ball hard. And some guy who's also an outfielder is going to get a big deal this offseason named Juan Soto. Those are the only four players who had a better barrel rate this year than Tyler O'Neill. That is absurd. His hard hit rate, his bat speed are both in the 90th percentile in Major League Baseball. Like, he is a data darling at the plate, and he walks. We love guys that walk. The Orioles were a little light on that at times this year. He walks 11.2% walk rate, the best of his career this year, and he's really worked on that. 7.1% in 2021, then up to 9.9, then up to 10.5, then up to 11.2 year over year. He is walking more and more every season. And that is something you like to see. Now, he's not over the hill, right? He's 29 years old, but as he's becoming more and more of a veteran player, he's getting a more and more keen eye at the plate. And you love to see that as a guy gets a little bit older, not older yet, he's 29, but a little bit older, and his abilities change at the plate as well. And 11.2%, not just good for Tyler O'Neill, like that was in the 87th percentile of Major League Baseball. That was good for the majors, not just good for O'Neill. Would have been one of the best numbers on the Orioles this year. And listen, his chase rate is pretty low. Like, he's only around 25%. Like, that's in the bottom half of baseball in terms of swinging at pitches outside the zone. So he's fairly selective. He's got a good batter's eye. And like, you compare him to Giancarlo Stanton because he's big, he's ripped, he has these giant exit velocity numbers, he has injury issues, which we'll get to. But Giancarlo Stanton chases the ball out of the strike zone way more than Tyler O'Neill does. And that is what, among other things, can separate those two guys as well. But there are certainly red flags when it comes to Tyler O'Neill. And one of those red flags is he going to turn into Giancarlo Stanton? Not the guy who was leading the Yankees through the postseason, but the guy who sometimes you rarely see on the field. And that has been the biggest issue with O'Neill. He just doesn't get on the field often enough. So we'll break down all those injury issues, a little bit of a decline defensively, and really the big hole in his offensive game. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, there is certainly a lot to like with Tyler O'Neill. Just look right here. If you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, I'm going to show you his baseball savant page. Like, there's a lot of red there on the barrel rate and the hard hit rate and the walk rate. Like, he just mashes the baseball. But there are also some concerns with Tyler O'Neill. So let's talk about what the red flags are. The things that might cause this 3-year deal to not work out for the Orioles. Let's just say it is strikeout city over there when Tyler O'Neill comes to the plate. If you get annoyed by strikeouts, if you don't like guys who strike out a lot, maybe shield your eyes for a good chunk of Tyler O'Neill's plate appearances because he had a 33.6% strikeout rate last year. The only time it was higher in his career was when he had a 40% strikeout rate in 61 games in his rookie season with the Cardinals in 2018. Let me put 33.6% strikeout rate into perspective. For players who played most of the time, so I'll say players with 450 plate appearances or more this season, only Zach Geloff in his first full season with the Oakland A's had a higher K rate in baseball this year at 34.4%. So among guys with 450 plate appearances, O'Neill had the second highest strikeout rate. Basically, I mean, you're looking at it, it's essentially on the dot, 1/3 of his plate appearances. Every 3 times he comes at the plate was a strikeout in 2024. And that can get annoying, and that can be a problem for you at times, certainly. And it's something that's going to come up. It's not like he's going to cut his K rate by 10% in 1 year. Now, just a year ago in St. Louis, he struck out 25.2% of the time with the Cardinals in 2023. If he could get back down to that rate, where he still had a 10.5% walk rate but didn't really hit for power, if he could get back down to those rates but still hit for power, then we're really talking. I don't think he's going to cut it by 8% again, but if he could get it under 30%, then we're really working with something here. But for now, that is quite a scary strikeout rate. And a 41% swing and miss rate on breaking balls, yeah, that is a concerning number. Like, that's one of the reasons why righties tend to have a lot of success against him. And as I mentioned, he is a slightly below average hitter, at least this year, against right-handers. It's because he swings and misses a lot against pitches from righties, and that's where a lot of his strikeouts stem from. Not all of them. He's close to equal opportunity. He'll strike out against lefties, but it is righties. Now, it's something I mentioned before, how he does have good plate discipline, right? Like, his chase rate is well above average. He doesn't really swing outside the strike zone a lot. So that usually lines up hand in hand. Like, guys who swing outside the strike zone a lot have high strikeout rates, and guys with high strikeout rates generally swing outside the strike zone a lot. So O'Neill doesn't. You're thinking, all right, he walks, he doesn't swing outside the strike zone. How does he strike out so much? Well, he swings and misses a lot inside the strike zone, and that's kind of concerning. His 22.2% in-zone swing and miss rate is the 4th highest of any hitter with at least 400 plate appearances in Major League Baseball this year. That's not what you want to see, swing and missing at that many pitches in the zone. Now, it's nice that he lets pitches out of the zone go, and he has a really high walk rate, so that helps with that. That when you hit home runs, when you make contact like he did 31 times, that helps as well. But that's a concerning number. Now, Rafael Devers had the highest in-zone swing and miss rate this year, and he was still great. He's a great hitter, so you can have success with that as part of your game. O'Neill had success this year, but it's usually not very sustainable unless you are Rafael Devers. He's got to find a way to just hit the ball in the strike zone a little bit more. And the Orioles are really good at teaching being aggressive in the strike zone and making contact on good pitches in the strike zone. I think that is something specifically they can help O'Neill get better with. I'm not sure they're going to lower his strikeout rate by that much. Again, I'm hoping they can get it closer to 30%. But I think the in-zone swing and miss rate can lower with help from the Orioles, and in turn, the strikeout rate will lower because of that. Now, the thing that is much more concerning than a K rate, again, Colton Cowser should have won Rookie of the Year. He had an over 30% strikeout rate. Like, guys in Major League Baseball today strike out 27, 8, 9, 30% of the time and are still great all-star players. That's a concern, but the bigger concern with Tyler O'Neill is health. Because Tyler O'Neill played 113 games for the Red Sox this year, and he's been in the big league since 2018. And 113 games with the second most games he has ever played in a full season. Back in 2021, when he had his full breakout year with the Cardinals, had a 143 WRC plus, 5-win season. Like, he was great. Anthony Santander's never had a 5-win season. Like, Tyler O'Neill was a star that year for the Cardinals. He played in 138 games, and that is by far a career high. This dude really can't stay on the field, and that is a concern. He had 3 separate trips to the IL this year, missed a week in April with a concussion, missed a little more than a week from May to June with right knee inflammation, and then missed a couple of weeks in August with a left leg infection. Now, the leg infection and the concussion, not ones where you're as worried about, like, long-term baseball injury-wise, it's going to happen again stuff, but these pile up. Now, he was on the IL for only a total of 28 games. The Red Sox also sat him for 21 games. There were 21 games this year where he was active and just did not appear in the game. Those were all against right-handed starters, where the Red Sox were maybe sitting him because of the righty, but more so just trying to give him a day off because he is just so injury prone that you need to, he's not going to play 162 games. Even if he's healthy, he's only going to play probably 140 some games. Just, you got to give this guy a little more days off because the way his body has looked the last few years. I just wanted to go through his injury history because it's wild how much time he has missed. 2023 with the Cardinals, he played 72 games. He missed 2.5 months with a lower back sprain. Then later in the year, he missed a couple of weeks with a right foot sprain. 2022, played 96 games with the Cardinals, missed 2 weeks with a right shoulder impingement, missed almost 2 months with a left hamstring strain. 2021, which was considered his healthy, dominant season, again, only 138 games, missed a couple of weeks with a right groin strain, also missed a couple of weeks with a broken finger. Of course, the 1 year he stays healthy is 2020, plays in 50 of the 60 games, but again, if it would have been a full season, probably would have ended up on the injured list anyway. 2019, he plays 60 games with the Cardinals. He missed 2 months with a right elbow ulnar nerve subluxation. Not sure what that is, but it sounds painful. And missed about a month with a left wrist sprain that year as well. 2018 was the year he came up. He played in 61 games, but it wasn't as much injuries, more of just kind of being a rookie coming up to join the team. So that's concerning. And again, he's only 29. It's not like he's 35. So on one side, there's more time to get healthier. On the other side, it's like, are his injuries only going to get worse from here? And they've already been bad. That's something you should be worried about too. But the worry is that, is he Giancarlo Stanton 2.0? Like, I've mentioned Stanton a couple of times, but, Tyler O'Neill, all the power in the world, right? Just like Stanton. We've talked about the crazy exit velocity numbers. Now, O'Neill's not as big as Stanton. O'Neill's listed at 5'11", 200. But you look at O'Neill and his big arms, like he is chiseled and ripped in a similar way, different body types, but in a similar way to Giancarlo Stanton. And in the same way that body type works against Stanton when it comes to staying healthy, that might be what's working against Tyler O'Neill. He's just so muscular that some of those soft tissue injuries just kind of crop up for him, for Stanton. And it seems like they're cropping up like that for Tyler O'Neill as well. And you can also see some of his other parts of his games dipping. When he first came up with the Cardinals, he had elite, and I mean elite, sprint speed when he first got to the big leagues. 99th percentile sprint speed in 2020 and 2019, 98 in 2021, 97 in 2022. Then a dip. He was still 80th percentile in 2023, so still a fast runner, but not an elite runner. But the years before that, his sprint speeds by StatCast were equal to Jorge Mateo. That's how fast Tyler O'Neill used to be. This year, he dropped down to 55th percentile. He was basically went from elite to a league average runner in 2 years at age 29. Some of that's injury. Some of that's just the long-term effects, and that is concerning as well. Also, lost some of his fielding ability this year. He was a pretty elite defender early in his career in St. Louis, had some good outs above average numbers. Then you look at last year, he just dropped to league average. He had 0 outs above average in 2023 with the Cardinals. And then this year, -4 outs above average in the outfield with the Red Sox. So that's not like horrendous. You can still certainly play in the outfield. And again, that's kind of close to what Anthony Santander did out there. It'll be kind of similar experience where he's not going to get to everything, but he'll get to the majority of baseballs and play an okay right field. But that's a drop-off from the really, really good Gold Glove level defender he used to be a few years ago in St. Louis. That is a drop-off happening when he is still in his 20s. And it's because of the health. Now, maybe he can just stay healthy and finally play 145, 150 games, and those numbers keep going up and he mashes for the Orioles. Maybe it's the case. But everything we've seen from Tyler O'Neill in his career tells you he's going to miss some time. And right, that is the whole deal here. Can he stay healthy? That's the whole thing. The whole thing that's going to decide whether this ends up being a good free agent deal or not for the Orioles is, can Tyler O'Neill finally stay healthy? And I doubt he's going to go 3 years of this contract without hitting the injured list, but can he avoid those big injuries that take him out for big chunks of time? And if he does stay healthy, the Orioles got a steal for 3 years and $49.5 million. Like Anthony Santander and Teoscar Hernandez, you could argue they both could be better options, but could get near $100 million total with more years in free agency this year. O'Neill gets half that for a guy who production-wise, when he's healthy, at least last year, was basically equal to Santander and Teoscar Hernandez as a productive hitter in the outfield. Now, you get a player who arguably has a higher ceiling, especially compared to Santander. Like, Santander never had anything close to a 5 WAR season. That's what O'Neill did in 2021. O'Neill's got these bigger and better exit velocity, hard hit, underlying numbers than Santander has. He has the potential to reach a higher ceiling than Santander ever will. But the floor is also lower because although Santander had all those injury issues early in his career, he's played 150 plus games in each of the past 3 seasons. Tyler O'Neill, on the flip side, has played 96 games, 72 games, and 113 games in the last 3 seasons. That is a big difference. The best ability is availability, and Tyler O'Neill has not had that. So the floor is much lower for him than it is for guys like Santander or Hernandez. And although the money's lower, there still is risk here. And that's why you get this guy for $50 million instead of $100 million, because there is so much risk. And again, the Orioles have position player depth where if O'Neill does miss time, you can fill in. You have Heston Kjerstad right there to play more right field. You can play more O'Hearn or Mountcastle or more Kobe Mayo, or maybe guys like Dylan Beavers or Judd Fabian are ready for the big leagues, or Jorge Mateo steps up as an outfielder. You can get Jackson Holliday or Ramon Arias or whomever in there more. Like, the Orioles have the position player depth to cover for it if O'Neill misses time. And you got to expect him to at least have one IL stint. It's just going to happen. It's Tyler O'Neill. But they have that ability, and they're also saving money by making this move instead of Teoscar or Santander. So the thing is, you better take that money you're saving and spend it elsewhere this offseason. David Rubenstein and Mike Elias are talking the talk more than ever. They got to walk the walk and spend that money. And I mentioned earlier in this podcast episode, as I'm recording here on Saturday night, that I figured backup catcher would be the only other position player the Orioles sign. And I predicted it would be James McCann. Not 5 minutes after I said that, I look at my phone, and the Orioles have a new backup catcher. It is Gary Sanchez on a 1-year, $8.5 million deal. So the O's now have their backup catcher too, and they're already starting to spend that money. So you know what? I'll be back tomorrow. What's better than a Saturday episode? How about a Sunday episode? We'll break down Gary Sanchez, why he is still close to the hitter he used to be in New York. But remember how he was a terrible defensive catcher? The Brewers might have fixed him this year. And he's actually better than McCann as a hitter and a defender. Come back tomorrow to tell you why the Orioles upgraded at backup catcher by signing Gary Sanchez after signing Tyler O'Neill. But let me know your thoughts in the comments here. Locked On Orioles YouTube page. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the Tyler O'Neill signing, how you think he will fit into this lineup. This is what I have right now, my projected lineup right now for the Orioles. Now, you can move some guys around. You can see it if you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. But Gunnar at short, Adley catching, O'Hearn DH, O'Neill right field, Cowser left field, Westberg third base, Mullen center field, Mountcastle first base, Holliday second base as your kind of main starting lineup for the Orioles. Again, you can mix and match how you want to put these guys in that order, try to spread out some righties and lefties as I like to do. But I don't know. I can't decide if O'Neill or Santander in right field makes that lineup look better. I'm a little biased towards Santander, so I feel like the lineup is a smidge worse, maybe. But let me know your thoughts as well in the Locked On Orioles comment section. And I'll be back tomorrow to talk about the next edition. Gary Sanchez is joining the Orioles. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's special Sunday episode of the podcast. Mike Elias certainly getting busy here on a Saturday night. But until tomorrow, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.